Welcome to the Nightlife Podcast. Have you ever dismissed a dream as just the pizza or your brain processing information while you sleep? More than we realize, our dreams are a goldmine of divine revelation hidden for us to discover, explaining deep mysteries in pictures and stories created for us by God. Once you realize this gift that has been yours all along, you'll never go back to spending the nightlife just sleeping. Hey everyone! Thanks for tuning in, and yes, we are doing this, an episode on political dreams. Have you ever had an inappropriately intense emotional reaction you later regretted? Unfortunately, this happens to all of us, and it's called emotional hijacking, or amygdala hijacking. The part of our brains designed to deal with immediate threats is called the amygdala, and it can overtake our capacity for logic and reason when triggered. This is why counselors advise never continuing an argument in an emotionally escalated state. I wish I could say I've never done this, valuing relationships as I do, but instantly a super embarrassing hour-long argument with my husband over misplaced scissors comes to mind. Thankfully, we recovered from that waste of time conflict and recognized a few hidden trigger points in the process. Just like me losing my mind over a pair of scissors, we live in a time where otherwise reasonable people have gone feral, attacking those with opposing viewpoints, sacrificing families and friendships on the altar of politics as if their very lives, not just their ideologies, were in danger. Sadly, most of what we call news today is actually propaganda, precisely designed to provoke fear and anger that prevent people from thinking clearly. I was on the fence about creating this episode for obvious reasons, but there is almost nothing that affects our daily lives more than politics. I've had so many political dreams through the years, and I'm always growing in my understanding of how to interpret them. Most of the time when we dream of others, there's an aspect of privacy to be respected, even if they are public figures. For this reason, I'll omit the names of the actual people from the dreams I share here. At times, it may seem like Jesus is sleeping in the back of the boat while we are near being capsized on the tumultuous sea of political waters. Has anyone experienced seasickness watching the news or financial markets in the past couple of weeks? Despite our feelings of disorientation, we can be sure that God is on the throne and available to help us in whatever rough waters we find ourselves in. In 2016, I dreamed of a huge military ship named America being used as a wild party ship just off the coast in the ocean, with people taking vacations on it. The ship was being affected by a rising tide and had to be evacuated. Then I saw it was tottering sideways. All of this happened at night, and the feeling of the dream from my perspective was dark and ominous, contrasted with the carefree celebration vibe of those who had been carousing on board. I woke up with a start and heard an audible voice say, "We need a planting generation." Looking back to 2016, I see our nation was in much more danger than most of us realized. The message of this dream was clearly a warning and a sobering indictment on the irresponsibility of those squandering our nation's prosperity to serve their own self-indulgence, rather than to fortify strong foundations for future generations. On a positive note, the implication seemed to be that the ship could be saved if we course-corrected now, uniting to make the necessary changes and sacrifices. I'm amazed at what a seismic shift we've seen in the 9 years since I had that dream. The era of exposure of political corruption since 2020 has awakened the sleeping lions and shifted the entire mood of our nation from complacency into active engagement. The tectonic plates are shifting, and I believe every person on Earth can feel it. Maybe you've heard the phrase, "Hard times make strong men make easy times make weak men, and weak men make hard times." It's easy to see where we've been in this cycle, but I'm hopeful as I see strong leadership rising in our nation once again. Have you ever noticed how the entire Bible was written with generations in mind? This is how God thinks, and this is a mark of maturity in each of our lives as well. A shift from considering personal impact to generational impact in all that we do. One listener had a disturbing dream she believes was a call to prayer. She was sitting in the back of a hearse next to a plain wooden casket. There were 2 other people in the car, but she never saw them. The worst part of the dream was that she smelled a putrid stench of rotting flesh. Suddenly, the casket moved and the upper part opened, which made her feel afraid of what she would see because of the awful smell. A hand came out, neatly wrapped in a dark gray mesh glove. And then the body sat up, all sealed in a dark gray mesh suit, kind of like Spider-Man's suit. She couldn't see anything through the mesh, but knew who it was, a U.S. president. She wondered why it smelled so bad if he was alive, and then saw there was a rotting corpse laying in the casket underneath this man. It took this dreamer months of praying to receive what she felt was the interpretation and call to prayer. The president in the mesh suit was clearly hiding, and the suit was a personal protection for him. She felt he was finally coming out of hiding because he had been involved in a ruse that was about to turn on him, and he had to get out before he was buried alive. The impression she had was that this president would rise as a different man than before, and that the gray mesh suit indicates the protection of a shadow government. Rather than a prediction that this man would turn our country over to global elites, she knew the outcome could be changed by prayer. She believes the other people in the hearse that she couldn't see were other intercessors who were also praying for our nation's leadership. You can see how the disturbing nature of this dream left a great impression on the dreamer, and even though it took her months, she was determined to discover the message God was showing her. Just a few nights ago, I dreamed a high-profile figure in the medical and scientific community was at my house. He was wearing 2 masks and told me I should wear a mask, to which I replied, "I'm not putting on a mask, you idiot." He wheeled around and started ranting about people like me who won't do what he says. So angry, I saw spit flying out of his mouth and was drawing back to avoid getting sprayed. He kept naming other doctors I must be listening to instead of him, none of which I knew, giving me the impression he assumed I had to be listening to some other doctor because it wasn't possible I could think for myself. In the next part of the dream, this man was still there sitting in my living room with my husband and me. In this scene, he looked very different. He was a shorter, plain-looking man, not only calm, but he also seemed humble and needy. I got the impression he didn't want to leave, so I told him we could take him out to lunch, and he was very eager. Then we were in the parking garage of our Bible college, and he told me he was a Christian. I thought he must have recently converted and was excited to hear his story. When dreaming of political figures, the first and most imperative question to ask is whether the person represents themselves or the sector they work in, or something else relating to them, such as their political party, policies, a scandal, or some other aspect of their position. I got really excited thinking of this notoriously corrupt man finding Jesus, but I thought the message of the dream was probably referring to the scientific and medical sectors in our nation being humbled and saved. I believe the topic of masks speaks to the exposure of evil authority that had been operating from and funded by our country for years, affecting the entire world mostly under the radar until 2020. The assumption that I couldn't think for myself unveils the arrogant control these people corrupted by power were operating in, and his outrage of being contradicted is a picture of his pride and the saying, "spitting mad." I think the first part of the dream represents the past, and the second part of the dream reveals what's about to happen. The man suddenly becoming shorter and plain-looking represents a shrinking of the power and influence he represents. This dream seems to be pointing towards a huge fundamental shift in this aspect of politics, and showing that the effects will be widespread, given his prominent position. Can you see that if I had dreamed of an average doctor or nurse or scientist, the message would indicate a change at the grassroots level? This dream was pointing to the power structures themselves, controlled by those in positions of authority, not the individual people working in these fields. This dream was obviously a call to pray for the destruction of evil operating in and through scientific and medical communities in our nation that affects the whole world. Of course, we never just pray against something, so I also felt called to pray that a new generation of leaders will emerge, who will operate in integrity and a determination to use their positions of power to help and not harm others. As we look at so many infamous atrocities throughout human history, The obvious question is how such evil people and plans gained power to begin with. Albert Einstein famously said, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything." No one person is going to save the world, but each of us has something we can do to affect the world around us. Cumulatively, we can have a great impact. Looking back, I think this next dream may have been more actionable than I realized, but I didn't perceive it at the time. In 2019, I saw a sinking ship with the name Investments. How much more specific could that be? It's dreams like these that I failed to comprehend, and trust me, there are many of them, that invigorate me to engage more fully in my interpretation process. I've had many dreams of talking to US presidents in a personal context and having an awareness that they're just people. Sometimes I've had important conversations with them, sometimes casual. At times, I felt compassion for them and genuinely enjoyed their company, even though I knew I didn't agree with them politically. In one dream, I overheard a phone conversation of a president who had just gotten out of office, giving advice possibly to someone in the next administration on how to influence people, or rather manipulate them. He said you have to appeal to their desire to be good people. But in the dream, I didn't see him as necessarily evil. I saw him as a shrewd and experienced politician who knew what angle to work to get things done. Taking advantage of people's goodness was just the means to the end of a higher good in his mind. This revelation felt more like a key of insight to unlock future perceptions, rather than a moral or ethical judgment on this man. It has actually proved to be amazingly helpful, as I can now see most people with opposing viewpoints are also driven by a desire for good. Often, we desire the same things as our opponents. We just disagree on the best way to actually achieve our goals. In one of my most favorite political dreams ever, a presidential candidate I liked but wasn't sold on drove a tractor into my living room with a bucket full of firewood. He was smiling confidently and asked me to load my prayer journals into the bucket. I got the impression he was going door to door collecting firewood from everyone for whatever he was doing. As he was leaving, I ran to him, grabbed his arm, and anxiously asked, "Is it time yet?" He smiled as he said, "Not yet, but it's close." And I felt so excited. It was a sunny day in this dream, and the feeling was happy and peaceful. This was an utter contrast to the political atmosphere of the time and the controversy and hatred surrounding this candidate. I was left feeling hopeful, refreshed, and confident in who to vote and pray for. In a recent political dream, I was at a specific grocery store, and the front of the store was filled with protesters with signs and flags, aggressively arguing with people coming into the store. Once inside the store, I was just trying to get snacks for a road trip, but ended up in this huge, creepy realm where people were stuck and couldn't get out. Two guys had a car accident in the store and were going to go to the hospital, also in this store realm, to get checked out. I told them to just leave now, because if you go to the hospital here, you'll never get out. I said we got into a car accident and that's how we got stuck here, and now we can never leave. If you've ever had a dystopian dream, you probably relate to the disturbing feeling that can carry over once awake. I didn't initially recognize this as a political dream until the meaning of the name of the store became clear to me, correlating to the first name of our nation's president and exposing him as a traitor. From there, the entire meaning unfolded quickly. The issue that the protesters were rioting about was not the real issue, but merely the entrance point into an entire dystopian reality to trap people in. The fact I was just stopping in for snacks for a road trip exhibits my initial mindset to ignore this issue so that I can just get what I need and be on my way, or carry on with life. Recognizing that we and others got trapped there due to a car accident reveals our failure to discern what was really going on. This dream was a direct warning that there was more than meets the eye to this political agenda, that I was ignorant of because it didn't affect my daily life enough to get my serious attention. We all have limited capacity of what we can pay attention to, so it feels like such a comfort to me that God will pull my attention to where it needs to be and show me things I couldn't otherwise know. One person who dreamed that President Trump would be elected for a second term felt surprised when he wasn't reelected, only to be surprised again when he actually did take office 4 years later. Who could have envisioned all that took place between his first and second term? Yet many who saw him serving 2 terms prophetically were reeling in confusion, not being able to fathom the way it actually unfolded. Did you hear about the 7-year-old boy in Guatemala who dreamed of President Trump being shot on live TV in a hockey arena, just as the inauguration celebration was moved to the Capital One Arena? The God of the universe, who sees and knows all, chose to give a dream to a young boy in another country as the means of warning and a call to prayer for our president. If that little boy, then why not me or you? In addition to dreams concerning the political sphere itself, we've all experienced politics in churches, businesses, families, and basically anywhere humans exist. There's actually a very real spiritual root to all of this. I once had an intensely graphic dream that a man I know who's involved in politics at the local level was trying to kill me. I'll refrain from the graphic details to keep this suitable for young listeners, but there were 3 specific ways he tried to kill me, all highly symbolic, exposing the presence of a demonic political spirit in his life. Interestingly, I mostly align with this person's political views. The disturbing dream served as a strong warning about this person. People operating from a political spirit can be unstable, divisive, domineering, and competitive in realms having nothing to do with politics. I'm always so thankful for dreams that reveal people to me in ways not apparent to my 5 senses. Second to religion, in my opinion, the political realm requires acute levels of discernment. As humans, we tend to be susceptible to believe the first thing we hear, join the herd mentality, get pigeonholed into an us versus them paradigm, or distracted by red herring issues meant to keep us from seeing what's really there. Along these lines, I love this warning in Colossians 2:8. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. It's humbling to acknowledge how easily manipulated we can be. But remember that many of these people have built successful lives and careers by being very skilled at these manipulation tactics. I've come to realize that the world is more complex and weird than I can possibly comprehend. Maybe I don't, after all, want to see where the sausage gets made. But I've come to rely fully on God's word and wisdom as the truest source of hope and stability in my life. Acts 17:26 says that God chooses the time and place of our habitation. Just like Queen Esther, we can be sure that we were placed here on earth for such a time as this. Life becomes worth living as we entwine ourselves to God and allow Him to show us why He chose to put us on earth here and now. As our roots go deeper, we'll naturally grow into a flourishing tree that provides shelter and nourishment to others. God's design for creation is that our trees would produce seed-bearing fruit, growing new trees in a beautiful cycle of perpetuation for generations to come, as long as the earth exists. Surviving the harsh elements feels like more than we can bear at times, but look around at all of the other tall trees surrounding you. Whether you realize it or not, you're growing stronger with each passing season, and someday, future generations will be thankful that you chose to survive and didn't give up. This episode is for you, strong ones. Thanks for listening.